everyone. Thanks for joining us for another edition of Texas Insider TV, brought to you by the Alliance of Texas Energy Producers. I'm Jim Cardle. Congressman Will Hurd is a freshman congressman from Congressional District 23, spanning from San Antonio, Texas, out west to the Big Bend and Alpine, Texas. He's a freshman with the rare distinction of having passed not one or two, but 4 bills through Congress and signed into law by the President of the United States. He's a member of the Homeland Security Committee and the Committee on Government Oversight and Reform, where he chairs the Information Technology Committee. A key member of Texas's legislative delegation for issues critical to our debate and politics right now. We're pleased to be able to visit with Congressman Will Hurd from the 23rd Congressional District. Congressman Hurd, thanks for joining us today.
Sure, thanks for having me here.
As I mentioned, Congressman Hurd is a freshman. He's up for re-election. He's had over 200 town hall meetings. Congressional District 29 is larger than some states, Congressman, and I want to talk about these bills that you've had passed. Congratulations on that. But as a freshman, as a representative with a huge amount of space, tell us what it's like. You're running, you've been on the go, and how in the world did you get those bills passed?
Sure, this is a great district. It goes from San Antonio to El Paso down to Eagle Pass. 29 counties, 2 time zones, over 800 miles of the border. It takes 10.5 hours to drive 80 miles an hour from one corner to the other. I get to represent part of my hometown of San Antonio and amazing places like Big Bend and Alpine and Fort Stockton and El Paso. Okay. And it's great being able to do that in Washington, represent this area in Washington, D.C. And, you know, my background is in national security. Okay. You know, I spent 9 years as an undercover officer in the CIA. I ran for office to be a leader on national security and the gold standard when it comes to constituent relations. So we focus very specifically on what I call our sphere of influence, those things that we can impact. And the first bill that we got signed into law had to deal with Border Patrol. Okay. Border Patrol, there's more Border Patrol in my district than anywhere else. Really? And DHS, Department of Homeland Security, in their infinite wisdom, was going to change how Border Patrol was paid. And the way this change was going to be implemented, a Border Patrol agent, a man or woman, was going to lose anywhere between $700 and $1,000 a pay period, and they get paid every 2 weeks, right? Only the federal government would think that makes sense. So we were able to pass some legislation that got signed into law to fix that problem, which was pretty awesome. And so for us, it's about understanding the issue, leveraging our connections and understanding, and working with our colleagues on both sides of the aisle to get things done.
Well, let me ask you about that size. You've had over 200 town hall meetings across that large district you mentioned. A lot of focus now on the election, obviously, but also a lot of focus on the lack of President Obama's prioritization for Homeland Security, domestic security. What are some of the things you're hearing on the campaign trail? What are the top priorities or the areas of concern in Congressional District 23?
So there have been 2 questions that I've gotten asked in every single event. Really? The first question is about Iran. The American people do not understand how this president is allowing this deal to go through. You know, the government of Iran just notified today that they received almost $100 billion from funds that were frozen in international accounts around the world. Okay. This is a government that is the largest state sponsor of terrorism, and we're allowing them to have more money. American people do not understand that. Second question I get asked is on cybersecurity, and it gets asked a number of different ways. Everybody knows someone who has had their identity stolen. Really? Everybody has probably had to get a new credit card issued because something went wrong. Every week almost, the American people are hearing about some new high-profile hack. And, you know, when I got out of the CIA, I helped build a cybersecurity company where we, try to test the digital networks of folks. And this is an important issue. Mm-hmm. We got to make sure we're defending our digital infrastructure, and this president's not.
Let me ask you, let's drill down a little bit first on the Iranian situation. A lot of folks don't realize, you mentioned the release of billions of dollars. A lot of folks don't realize, though, that Iran has actually been breaking the recent nuclear agreement and actually testing ballistic missiles or military armaments of significant impact. Talk about that if you can. What exactly is going on with their testing right now?
Yeah, about 2 months ago, the Iranians tested a long-range ballistic missile, which was in violation of a number of UN treaties. I was in a meeting when all this deal was being debated, and it had John Kerry, and we were talking about. I said, the Iranians have lied to and misled the IAEA. That's the UN nuclear watchdog. They've lied to and misled the UN Security Council on a number of occasions. They are funding terrorist operations in Yemen, Iraq, Syria that are targeting our people. And we think we can trust these folks. The problem with this administration is that our enemies don't fear us and our allies don't trust us. And that has to change.
Critical point that we're obviously seeing about our allies not trusting us, our enemies not fearing us. You're seeing that whether it's on the right with Donald Trump or on the left, frankly, with Bernie Sanders. How important, because your area is so rural, a lot of West Texas country, they got problems out there, right? How important are these issues? What degree of concern and severity are they expressing to you?
Well, this is their number one issue. This is the issue they bring up. When you talk about border security, this is a public safety issue as well, because these are the folks that are dealing with this. When you talk about the narco traficantes in northern Mexico and what they're doing, it's just they're scared. And what happens is when you capture some of these folks, we're not enforcing the law, and we're turning these people that are violating the law back into society. And folks on the border just don't understand that. And so we can secure our border. And when I say secure the border, we have to facilitate the movement of goods and services, right? Mm-hmm. One of the ways to improve our economy is to increase trade. No better trading partner than Mexico. But we can secure the border and facilitate trade, but we also need to enforce our laws. And that's one thing that this president and this attorney general doesn't have the greatest track record on.
A little bit divergent on that. A lot of the state reps and senators we have come in talk about border security, and it's focused more on the drug aspects. Tell us what you're seeing about new troops on the ground, new forces on the ground. Are we having any success stopping the drug trafficking, perhaps?
So the way we're going to stop the drug trafficking is to have intelligence-led operations. And that means doing more in Mexico, in Guatemala, in Afghanistan, and stopping those things before they get to our borders, right? And what we're seeing now with Border Patrol is they're taking that kind of focus. They're focusing on 18 of these transnational criminal organizations and trying to stop them before they get to our border, working closer with the Mexican government. And there are some entities within Mexico that we can operate and we can work with and stop this. So it has to be done over there because we're losing if they're already crossing the border.
And how about, not necessarily on the drug trafficking, but the Middle Eastern descent type folks coming across the border? It's not in the news as often as it should be about the U.S. forces actually catching personnel trying to cross the border. Do you see a lot of that, or can you share any update on the numbers there?
Sure. Al-Qaeda, ISIS, they're more focused on coming through our normal ports of entry. You know, for them, it would be easier to get a European passport and use that in order to travel to the United States rather than trying to sneak in across the border. There is no bigger issue in the intelligence community than trying to find a nexus between drug trafficking organizations and transnational criminal organizations in Mexico and international Islamic terrorism, right? And this is a big issue. This was an issue I was looking at when I was in the CIA. I know my colleagues that are still in there are looking at this. What's more likely is that they're going to come through Europe. I was on a committee that looked at the issue of foreign fighters coming to the United States, and we found that our European allies are not doing enough to check travelers against known databases over there before those folks come here. And that's why we did passed some legislation, got signed into law, on restricting and making sure that our European allies are doing that in what's called the visa waiver program.
We could spend a whole show on that. We'll hope to have you back. But let me change issues if I can here a little bit. Folks, we're thrilled to be visiting today with Congressman Will Hurd from the 23rd Congressional District of Texas, bordering from San Antonio all the way out to Big Bend and Alpine, Texas. Congressman, there's another issue that you've been working on, and it's got not only Texas impact, but national impact as well, and that's the Waters of the United States Act, WOTUS, I believe is what you folks refer to it, where the EPA is able to claim jurisdiction over a farmer's gullies, bar ditches, little bitty creeks. It's in the courts, but it's an important issue, Texas, especially in your district, being agricultural based perhaps. What's the status of the Waters of the United States Act, and do you see anything coming down the pike?
So it's in the courts, and the courts issued a stay. So it says that the EPA can't implement this new rule. Congress has already passed a resolution that says we're against the EPA's interpretation of this. And basically, it's another example of this administration trying to do a power grab and going beyond its executive prerogative.
Mm-hmm.
Because the only way that you try to make a dry creek on your land say that's a navigable waterway is because you want to get on someone's property.
Exactly.
And you know, here in Texas, we're strong supporters of private property rights. So this rule is in the courts,
mm-hmm.
and it's likely to be tied up in courts for at least the next year. So that means there's going to be another occupant of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, and so hopefully we get a Republican in there, and then we can stop this bill and not have to worry about the court case.
Okay, one final question before we let you get going here down the road. I'd be remiss probably if I didn't, because of your leadership on the Homeland Security Committee and the Government Reform Committee. Last Friday, the FBI and the State Department are releasing Hillary's.
Because they contain top secret information. That's a problem. And Hillary Clinton is saying, well, that information wasn't top secret when she sent it. I don't know of many instances where something becomes top secret after the fact. Having spent almost a decade in the intelligence community, you know, that sounds crazy to me. I know the FBI is investigating, and to me, if you're the head of an agency and you can't protect the information and the people within that agency, you are not fit to lead. And so this is going to continue to be an issue, and we're going to make sure we keep focus on it.
So you would be one who says James Comey and the professionals in those departments are going to put politics aside and actually deal with facts.
Absolutely. I think there's not too many people respected more than James Comey in Washington, D.C., and this is a holdover from previous administrations, and he's going to do his job. And so a lot of people are focused on this. A lot of people are going to be interested in this, and we got to let this move forward. But when the State Department is saying 22 emails of top secret information, that's a huge problem.
Well, we're going to have to leave it as a huge problem. Mm-hmm. Congressman, we appreciate you coming in. Hope you'll come back to join us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
Folks, we appreciate you joining us for another edition of Texas Insider TV. Congressman Will Hurd from the 23rd Congressional District of Texas and a member of the Homeland Security and Government Reform and Oversight Committees. We're thrilled to have you in.
Thank you.
Remember, folks, you're either an insider or you're not. I'm Jim Cardle. Come back and see us. Thanks.